The Australian Grand Prix ended in a controversial way, and fans want to know what happened. The FIA has once again become the centre of attention, and again for all the wrong reasons. After the red flag was shown with only 2 laps left in the race, Sainz was the biggest loser. He was given a suspicious 5-second penalty, and the second restart has made people in the paddock look twice. Many drivers were justifiably annoyed, but the Mercedes driver George Russell and his team principal Toto Wolff were the loudest one. It just begs the question, why does the FIA look so incompetent and straight up panicking when needing to decide on these events, which in turn almost always leads to the wrong decision? Stick around to find out. Max Verstappen won the Australian Grand Prix for the first time in his career, but it seems like every time the Dutchman reaches a milestone, like winning his 2 championships in the past 2 years, it's in a controversial way. Even though there were 3 red flags and 2 standing starts, and the third was almost a provisional start, the FIA has made it so that many fans would give up on the sport if it continues like this. Russell and Sainz were the biggest losers after the first race restart because they went into the pit lane under the safety car even though they didn't think the race would be stopped. And yet this isn't what hurt Russell the most. What hurt him more was having to end his race early because of problems with the W14. We will take a look at this in more depth later. Mercedes might want to pay more attention to this in the future, since Stroll couldn't finish the last race because of a similar problem with his Mercedes engine. Before we see what Wolff had to say, make sure to like and subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, as to not miss out on our future videos. There was a lot of criticism pointed towards the FIA after the race. Lando Norris said that he thinks they put on the red flag just for show. Sainz was unpleased as well, asking for explanation from the stewards, saying that this was the most unfair penalty ever. But one of the loudest ones was Toto Wolff, reflecting on the chaotic ending to the Australian Grand Prix. Toto Wolff had no complaints about how the rules were interpreted by race control. We looked it up. It was the rulebook. It was a bit confusing, but it was like it's written down, he told media in the Melbourne paddock on Sunday evening. Obviously, these results like this are good for some teams and bad for others. If you throw a red flag and you have a crash with a lap to go. With George Russell losing out due to the initial red flag due to having pitted under the initial safety car as the then race leader, Wolff said he had no complaints about how the red flags were deployed. The Mercedes team boss pointed out that as long as the situation is clear for all, then he would enjoy the entertainment factor such restarts provide. Both red flags, we didn't see them coming, he said. I think restarts are great and a great entertainment factor. We just need to understand going forward when are red flags being put out and what is the safety car or the virtual safety car. I think those incidents you could have applied either. I think why Formula 1 is so successful is because it's sport and we follow the rulebook. But that gives great entertainment, and I think as long as it's clear how this is being interpreted, I'm fine. Whether you call a VSC or safety car or you red flag it, as long as we understand in terms of us being able to plan a little bit or having the same rules for everyone, then that's okay. He ended the statement by saying that he received a call from his wife Susie at home, saying how entertaining the race was as a spectator. On the other hand, George Russell didn't share the neutral point of view like his team principal. In his assessment of the handling of the incident, Russell questioned the FIA's decision-making. The Grand Prix Drivers Association director said, "I thought the red flag was totally unnecessary. There was obviously quite a bit of gravel on the track, but there was a clear racing line. We've seen it far worse in the past. It's sort of reminiscent of the decision of last week in Saudi to bring out the safety car when the car was totally off the track. So I don't really know what's going on with some of the decisions at the moment. We're all trying to work together with the FIA to improve things, but it's seemingly a bit of a challenge." Russell, who eventually retired owing to a power unit failure, reckoned his Australian GP weekend performance was a match for his maiden F1 victory in Brazil last season. The only good thing for George in Australia this year is that he can say he handled it like a man. The English driver was screwed on lap 7 when the chaos caused by Alexander Albon's crash at the Australian GP in Melbourne took away his lead in the race. It went from being a nightmare to a disaster when the race started again and his car caught on fire because the power unit broke. It was the last blow to the face on a day when everything fell apart. Russell was fighting for 6th place when a problem with his power unit caused the back of his car to catch on fire. He had to pull off to the side of the track, which caused a virtual safety car to be sent out. As marshals came to put out the fire that had spread to the back of his car, he was able to get out of his car. It just wasn't his day. Earlier, the race was stopped for more than 20 minutes because Albon crashed into the wall and scattered debris all over the track. Russell and his Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton did small miracles to pass Max Verstappen in the first 2 laps, but all of Russell's hard work was undone when his team decided to bring him into the pits while the safety car was out. While he went to get new hard tyres, Hamilton and Verstappen stayed out and were in the lead when the race started again, and shortly thereafter, Russell was back in 7th place. Hamilton was mad at first when his team chose to put Russell in the car instead of him, saying that it put him in a massive disadvantage. But when the race was stopped only moments later, he calmed down. Toto Wolff then apologized to Russell, explaining to him that the team had made the wrong choice. Russell forgave the team and said that it wasn't their fault. In the end, Mercedes' squabbling counted for nothing, as Verstappen snatched the race lead from Hamilton on lap 12. The team had enjoyed a mostly successful campaign in Melbourne, with Russell and Hamilton qualifying 2nd and 3rd, but the team is still disappointed as to how far behind Red Bull they are. In 2021, the last race of the season caused tectonic shifts in how the FIA now runs races. This year, both the race in Abu Dhabi and the Australian GP was stopped because the FIA says a race shouldn't end under a safety car or red flag. Then Verstappen won the championship with a fair and shared 1-lap race, but strangely that couldn't have been how this race ended. Even though the FIA tried to give all the drivers a fair chance to race for 2 laps, which would have been the best mini-sprint we've seen, it ended up with 4 drivers dropping out and both Alpine drivers colliding after turn 2. So the FIA made things worse for the drivers by trying to bring them together. Verstappen talked about this and said that the race was a total mess. Aside from the drivers, Toto Wolff was also very critical of the people in charge, giving out red flags like they were candy. The Austrian thinks that by doing this, the sport is turning into too much of a show, which is similar to how he felt when Drive to Survive started showing different scenarios, and he thought that the sport was becoming more and more like the Kardashians. Even though the red flags gave Hamilton some hope that he could win over Verstappen, if he could pull ahead with 2 laps to go, it's clear that Wolff is an advocate for fairness in the sport, which is something the FIA hasn't done very often in the first 3 races of the season. This means that no matter what, the FIA needs to put the drivers and their needs first, and then the entertainment factor. What do you think? Can the FIA work it out amongst themselves and sort the rules yet again? Because the way they are right now, it does not bode well. Let us know in the comments below what are your thoughts about the race. If you want to learn more about the insane discovery Red Bull found on the RB19, make sure to click on our next video.